Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice radio, so today I have grabbed a couple of good friends into my hotel room to sit on my bed for the first edition of what I like to call Pillow Talk.
And none of that sounds dodgy at all.
Not at all. What is far more important is this is going to be a nice introduction, bit of a preview for the London Pokemon Trading Card Game International Championships, which are happening this weekend in London. So, Joe, start us off. Best deck for this weekend is what?
Gardevoir GX is pretty much definitely going to be the most popular deck and what I think a lot of players will be opting to play. It's just a very versatile deck that has a lot of different sort of draw engine approaches. You can play Octillery and Sylveon. That's probably the most common build. So although you are a stage 2 deck, you have lots of means to actually get set up. And when you do get set up, you have, you know, the most dangerous card in the format that can attack for 1 energy just to reach 2 hit KOs, but can also ramp with Secret Spring, DCs and stuff like that into ridiculous damage output.
It does get a little bit silly. 30 damage for every energy attached to both active. Bit dumb. Now, Nick, we've been hearing all weekend, I say all weekend, all of today, about this secret broken Gardevoir deck, where you take out Sylveon and you put in a bunch of max potion. Are you buying it?
I'm not sure. I think I'd have to sort of wait until it went on sale first before I consider it. But in all seriousness, I've been hearing a lot about this, and I get it. I completely get it. It's the whole thing about Gardevoir is that you don't get punished too much for getting rid of a bunch of energy off a max potion, because then you can just build up again very easily as using Secret Springs, as previously mentioned. The only thing with it is that the build that I've played a lot before is probably more along the lines of the standard build that Joe mentioned with sort of Sylveon and also Acerola. I feel like Acerola is just so strong, because with it you can pick up the energy and then just reattach them again, so you get to do it healing. But then the problem is that you get put back into the setup because you're putting one of your Gardevoirs back into your hand, so you can't work off of one Gardevoir alone. If I'm being completely honest, I've not tested enough with the broken deck version. Shout out to Cena for to make a sort of a good call either way.
I mean, personally, I reckon it's one of those decks. If you draw the max potion at the right time, you're going to win the mirror, you're going to win most matchups. Unless you're against something like Metagross, which is just getting a one-hit KO anyway through weakness, you're going to wreck. And it's going to be great. Problem is, we were talking to Gonzalo Ferreira earlier, and he made the excellent point of what happens if you just Juniper, or Sycamore as it is nowadays, I should say. You just Sycamore, free max potion turn 1. You have nothing then.
Yeah.
And then you're basically just playing Gardevoir without Sylveon. And if there's one thing we've learned from all of these tournaments since Worlds, post-rotation Gardevoir is better with Sylveon. That question has been answered.
You see, I'm not sure if I buy that point entirely on the Sycamoring way free max potions, because you can Syc away free of any resource in any deck, right? That's not really a point that's specific to, that. You could do the same if you're playing Acerola and regular Gardevoir. You could just Sycamore away Acerolas. It doesn't necessarily make it worse inherently just on the basis of that being something that could happen.
Yeah, and Guardy can actually recycle the cards better than most other decks.
Exactly.
But yeah, I tested a bit with the sort of Cena list, I guess you could say, and a few of my friends have been testing it as well. And like you said, Ross, only Metagross is like the one-hit KO deck in the format right now. You could argue that Volcanion is, but you don't need Max Potion to win the matchup as a Guardy player, so there's lots that help you out in lots of like 50-50 matchups, and there's Buzzwole around, there's Potowns. A lot of people opt for that approach, trying to hope that that's enough to beat Guardy. And when you play 4 Max Potion that you can even recycle, it's like really hard to beat. So it is like king of the memes right now, and Beacon isn't as good as Sylveon just in general. But I think it's actually going to be a threat, and I think for mirrors alone, people will start picking up like 2 copies of Max Potion, maybe not the full 4, but definitely a higher heal approach.
Just an interesting point on that. You're saying that there's only one deck that can really one-hit KO properly, and that's Metagross. Celesteela, there's been murmurs.
I have heard murmurs of Celesteela. Yeah. Just to make a point from a minute ago, when Joe said Beacon, he was of course referring to Alolan Vulpix, using Beacon to search out Pokemon as opposed to using Sylveon. I played against Celesteela online the other day. 4 energy, 130 damage, and they got it going quite quickly, and it's got a weird weakness to lightning. And unless Raichu GX, and a few weeks ago, a lot of people hyping Raichu GX, and it's all gone away. Now, when I say a lot of people hyping, I mean I saw a lot of posts online, not necessarily hearing from good players that they're going to play it. I'm not hearing anything about Raichu GX. No one's playing Lightning, which means Celesteela's just not being hit for weakness.
The biggest concern is actually Tapu Koko promo that's just in a load of decks. Not only does it have free retreat, so it's harder for Celesteela to knock out, but also it hits it for weakness with Choice Band, and that's teched into a few decks still. Maybe less so than previously because there's Mr. Mime being thrown around in a few decks. But Tapu Koko is really annoying for Celesteela.
It is resistant to metal as well, isn't it? I'm fairly sure.
Tapu Koko?
Yeah. So
they have to do the 130 attack, which is 4 energy.
It's quite a lot. I can't tell you who, but I was speaking to a player who made top 22 in Europe last year, who was legitimately considering Celesteela. It actually wasn't.
Well, he is as well.
And that.
He also made an article with it in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, as we're naming people.
okay.
He just sent me a message being like, "Hey Ross, where can I get Celesteelas?" And I'm like, "How?" When I said Celesteela was not completely and utterly terrible, people were like, "Oh, hang on a second, Ross." So, I mean, we'll talk about more secret decks in a minute. We've said Gardevoir. The other big deck this weekend, Garbo to Drampa. I've long been of the opinion that Garbo to Drampa, if you want to cut, if you want to get points, and the big subplot here, top 128 at internationals gets something like 100 points.
That's right.
Which in Europe is 40% of your invite, which is ludicrous. Garbo to Drampa with a competent player will probably cut. I don't think it's going to win the tournament. Am I alone?
No, I think that's a fair assessment of the situation. It's not as if Garbo can't win events. It did win Liverpool regionals, we must remember. Granted, that was before
I'm
rotation.
talking post-rotation.
Okay, post-rotation, sure. But even then, it almost won in Bremen. It only lost to Mark Lutz in the finals. I don't think there's any reason specifically why it can't win. And given that it has such a high likelihood of making the top cut based on previous precedent alone, I was thinking about this because you mentioned this last night saying, oh, great deck to top cut with, not a great deck to win the event with. But the more I think about it now, the more I think, hold on, if it can cut, why can't it win?
Yeah, I think it's really good, and some huge name players will play the deck, like Tor Reklev, Sam Chen as well, top of the world right now on CP. There'll be players who definitely will play that deck, so I think it has a chance to go as far as any other deck, and it's just safe, as you said, so people will flock to it just like they flock to Gardy. It'll probably be the second most popular deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be Gardy, it's going to be Garboda. The other thing that needs to be mentioned, of course, London has Shining Legends legal, essentially for the first time. Crimson Invasion is literally legal tomorrow for the very first day of legality of the set. Not to mention these promo GXs like Celesteela, which the answer to the question was, you've got to buy the... Is it Celesteela with Pheromosa? And then it's Buzzwole with Xurkitree. Yeah. So... Are there any new decks? People have been hyping Buzzwole a little bit. People have been hyping Sylveon a little bit, and I'm partly to blame for this, I will happily admit. Are there any new decks that we're really buying?
I do like Zoroark just because it's like a draw engine in itself. There's all sorts of Zoroark builds. I know there's a lot of hype around like a Ninetales build. A lot of League Cups have been going around with that.
This as well.
I'm not sure that's amazing. I like Decidueye Zoroark as well. I think that's flexible damage, and that's always really good in the game. And there's even some like wacky counter energy based lists that run things like Cobalion, Sudowoodo, Mimikyu, all these sorts of weird basic Pokemon that can sort of cash in on the opponent going too aggressive against you and really swinging a board state with one single attachment. So lots of things to think about with Zoroark, because although it is weak to fighting, which is really bad because Gallade is like going to be everywhere, it's just a draw engine card that's insane, so you can build around it quite easily.
You know, Joe, it's an interesting point you touched on with counter energy. The two counter cards, counter energy and counter catcher. I really struggle to sort of see past them in terms of how they were before, because obviously before we had Scramble Energy and Power Hand Extension, which essentially did similar things. Power Hand Extension was the same, except it had another effect you could do, which is you could move an energy from one thing to another thing on your opponent if you wanted to, and Scramble Energy was 3 rainbows instead of 2. But given how broken those cards were in their day, it's hard not to see the newer versions in the same light. But I just know deep down that they're not going to see as much play. I don't know where you think they're going to sit in terms of tomorrow. Like, are we going to see them at all?
I think we'll see some people play it. I know that there's a couple of my friends are thinking about playing the Zoroark list. I know there's even maybe a few prominent UK players going for a pretty straightforward Drampagarb, but they're playing like 3 counter energy and Cobalions just to counter Gardy. So I wanted to show up, but as you said, it depends on how many people actually test the deck. And you really have to be committed towards playing a counter energy deck to be confident enough to bring it to an internet.
What about counter catcher though?
I don't see that seeing play.
No, see, Counter Catcher confused me. These are the new counter cards. Counter Energy is like 2 Rainbow Energy if it's attached to a non-EX, non-GX and you're behind on prizes. Counter Catcher is just a Lysander as an item card, the old Pokemon Catcher, if you're behind on prizes. And the thing that gets me about Counter Catcher, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing, is Luxray GL in its time, amazing. And then Pokemon Catcher, amazing. When we had no other option, Pokemon Reversal was amazing. Lysander was amazing. Guzma was amazing. Gusting Effects, named so because Gust of Wind was the very first one in base set, have always been amazing. Yeah. So why would we think Counter Catcher would not be? Especially you cannot Sycamore for a Guzma.
Well, no.
But you can Sycamore for a Counter Catcher.
Exactly.
I think it's just that it's just so specific. And when you, like you said, all of these things have been sort of in every list at the moment, but every list is playing 4 copies of Guzma. So it feels overkill to play 4 copies of Guzma plus 2 counter catchers when they could be consistency cards. When you're a stage 2 deck, you simply don't have space. Other evolution decks, they're often playing like 8 tools because they're playing Gardevoir. So again, it's more often than not a question of space. And oftentimes as well, I feel just in general, there's a fear of Trash Launch Gardevoir, and just being an item in itself is a downside a lot of the time. So I don't see it as much as you do, but I can see that it will swing games if you opt to play it and hit it on the optimal turns. It just feels super niche to me.
What people did when Power Hand Extension was a thing is they would intentionally change the way they play. Maybe sort of they fall back behind a prize early so they could have that really big swingy turn where they can dig for the power and then play it. I'm wondering if people might do the same with Counter Catcher, but if they do, what deck?
Yeah.
I think almost any, because the thing about Counter Catcher is you have a starting Pokemon, something like an Alolan Vulpix, and you just sit there getting completely set up. If your opponent KOs it, then you open up with Counter Catcher, and that's the way I see Counter Catcher working. I mean, let's take something like a Raikou from Shining Legends in any kind of lightning deck. You can just keep accelerating energy by doing so, and then eventually your opponent is going to have to KO it, or you're just going to get a really good board state.
This is the thing though, I think early game it's actually pretty weak, because if they're taking a KO, that's probably the thing you want to hit in the active. I think it actually has most potential late on in the game, like if you're playing maybe like a Puzzle of Time variant. I know there really aren't any in Standard, but you can play it with Zoroark because you have trade support. If you just play like a single copy and you force a 7 prize game, you could quite easily do it with a Mind Jack Zoroark. And then you go down to 2, they go down to 1 prize. Then you can just hit Counter Catcher for game, and that's like a really good thing.
Wasn't that pretty much exactly what happened in like the Japanese advert for for the set?
Yeah, pretty much. So like they know how to play it. Yeah, I think that's how it'll be played. Yeah.
They're on it. So, we like Zoroark, Boswell, Sylveon. Last question for this video, because we can't go on for too long. We have other commitments this weekend. We're casting, apparently, someone's told me. So, Boswell, Sylveon, are we buying them? And if so, which one are we buying?
Metal Sylveon, probably my favourite archetype of Sylveon. I know some people have tried to partner Boswell and Sylveon together. I'm not sure how strong that is.
No, too much special energy.
Yeah, and I think Boswell Zoroark might be a better build anyway, just because, again, you have a draw engine. But, yeah, I quite rate it. I don't think it'll see a huge amount of play because, as we saw last year at London, everyone just played super safe. And I think this new set has come out, and a lot of people have the new cards like in and around Tier 2 instead of Tier 1. So I don't think many people will be risking Sylveon. But if you put the testing in, there's a lot to like. The free retreat is insane. Energy acceleration throughout the game is absurd as well, and the GX attack can blow something up on a certain turn, and you can potentially have 3 very important weaknesses that you can hit if you play the memory cards for the Sylveon, and also having metal typing and a bunch of metal tech Pokemon. You can, hit a lot of things for weakness, and that's still insane in the card game when everything gets damaged for ×2.
Yeah, I agree entirely. That's a really, pretty much everything that you just said about Sylveon is entirely why I really, really like the card, and it'll be interesting to see if because there's been some debate as to whether we're going to get the other memories or not. There's 2 more coming. Not
Fire and Lightning.
Yeah, but they'll be next step.
Yeah, that'll be Ultra Prism.
Yeah, but if we get like the last 2, so that Sylveon could literally hit anything for weakness, that would be quite interesting to see. But even then, it's whenever I look at a sort of a Pokemon card, especially in a vacuum, I look at sort of how much it sort of does sort of like on its own and how self-reliant it almost is. And Sylveon has a lot of those sort of things going for it. Very easily manageable energy cost, energy acceleration built in. You have more flexibility of other stuff that gives basic free retreat. there's just a lot to like about that card in general. A lot of sort of like tick marks for what makes a good Pokemon card. So I'm a big fan.
No, I mean, last year in London, we really saw the Yveltal invasion. 5 of the top 8, all of the top 4. I think the last 4 games that we streamed last year were all Yveltal mirrors. It's probably not going to happen this weekend. I mean, essentially, to sum up what we've been saying, Garbo, Drampa, and Gardevoir are the 2 best decks in the format. Maybe we're going to see the traditional Gardevoir Sylveon list. Maybe we're going to see the new Cena deck with Max Potion. New cards, we expect to see a bit of a splash, but really we're talking individuals and techs more than about anything else. Unfortunately, if we go on much longer, I'm going to be editing this until the early hours of the morning, and apparently we're casting tomorrow. So, I'm going to say cheers, Nick.
Thank you, Ross.
I'm going to say cheers, Joe.
Thank you very much.
And of course, do make sure you tune into the stream tomorrow. It's going to be wonderful. And we will do a nice wrap-up video when it's all said and done so you can see what happened. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross. He's been Nick. He's been Joe. And you've been watching PTCG Radio.
Cool.